Good afternoon. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Pagani Design PD-1662. This watch is available from Pagani Design official store on AliExpress for €120. So firstly, let's look at the box that the watch comes in, and then I'll talk you through the other items one gets with the piece. So the watch comes in this standard Pagani Design cardboard watch box, and the watch sits on a piece of foam inside a foam cutout panel in the base, as one would expect. Although basic, it does suffice in protecting the watch in shipping from any damage, and therefore I think it's perfectly acceptable, bearing in mind this is a low tier price point piece at only €120. With the watch, one gets this basic owner's instruction manual, clear concise diagrams. The instructions are in English, and it details the operation of the movement used, which is the Mingzu caliber DG3804 automatic. This is the plastic guarantee card that comes with the watch, and as usual the reverse isn't filled in. However, I'm pleased to report the watch is covered by the usual 12-month international guarantee. This is the plastic tag that comes with the watch. And lastly, one also gets this Pagani Design branded microfiber polishing cloth. I always think it's a nice touch to get a branded microfiber polishing cloth irrespective of the price point of a piece. So, with regards to the specifications of the piece, this is the Pagani Design PD-1662 Riddler. The watch is clearly an homage to the Rolex GMT Master 2 Riddler, and it has very similar proportions. We have a 40mm case diameter. We have a 48mm lug-to-lug measurement, a thickness of 13mm, and a lug width of 20mm. The oyster-style bracelet tapers from 20mm at the lugs down to 16mm at the flip-lock clasp. The flip-lock clasp is signed with Pagani Design engraved to a high standard. Flawless mirror polishing to the centre section to the body of the clasp, which contrasts with the brushed satin finishing to the outer sections of the body, and that complements the flawless mirror polishing to the flanks. No sharp edges, no burrs, it doesn't have sharp corners, so it's a very well finished flip-lock clasp. I'll show you the interior. Solid milled 316L grade stainless steel, mirror polished to the top side, underside and flanks, and the centre section is satin finished. Well executed, no sharp edges to it, and no excess play in the hinge pins. It also has a 5mm EasyLink style extension which deploys with a nice positive click, and it's well executed. It also snaps into the body of the clasp with a nice positive click, and it is well made. So I like the way the clasp snaps shut with a nice positive click, and there's also a nice positive secondary click to the flip lock, and it's one of the better quality flip lock clasps Pagani Design use. With regards to the rest of the specification, we have a flat sapphire crystal. Now the negative of this flat sapphire crystal is there is no AR coating on the underside. Pagani Design have recently begun introducing AR coating. For example, the 1692 Air King and Explorer homages have AR coating, as does the 1733 Milgauss homage, and I really think that the 1662 should have clear AR coating on the underside, because as you can see there is a lot of glare and highly reflective nature due to the silver applied indices and the silver mirror polished Mercedes handset, and it really does need AR coating because as you can see it's very shiny and reflective and therefore has poor legibility. We have a Cyclops magnifier with 2.5 times magnification. Now the first thing I want to bring to your attention is there is a QC issue. This Cyclops magnifier is crooked, it's rotated clockwise, so you can see it's not straight above the dates complication. And I think the problem is, when they pressed in the sapphire crystal, it was rotated slightly clockwise, and therefore that's tilted the Cyclops magnifier crooked. If you look at the Cyclops magnifier closely, you can see it's slightly crooked, it's slightly tilted to the right, clockwise. And this is a fundamental QC issue that is unacceptable regardless of the price point of the watch. I appreciate this is €120, we're not looking at a €10,000 Rolex. But a crooked Cyclops magnifier on the sapphire crystal is wholly unacceptable. It's very easy to align the Cyclops magnifier over the date window because one can simply rotate the sapphire crystal clockwise or anti-clockwise prior to it being pressed in. So this is something that's really disappointing about the watch. With regards to the rest of the specification, we have a solid 316L grade stainless steel bezel, and that's inlaid with a ceramic bezel insert. Now I'm going to bring to your attention another QC issue. They've actually made a mistake in making this Riddler bezel, which is black and green ceramic. If you look closely at the 6 Arabic numeral, you can see that the green portion is too low. If you look at the 6 numeral, you can see the black and green meet, and you can see there's a line where the black and green ceramic splits. Now, if you look at the green portion, you can see that the green half of the bezel sits too low. They should have split the green and black higher up across the 6, because if you look close at the 3 o'clock index on the dial, the 15-minute tick, you can see that the green is actually lower than the 3 o'clock index on the dial, the 15-minute tick on the chapter ring. So it's not actually symmetrical. There's more black on the bezel than there is green. The green is too low on the 6 o'clock side. And again, it's incorrect on the 1800 hour mark on the Arabic numerals. On the 9 o'clock side of the dial, you can see that the green is too low. It should be higher up. And it's actually low by 1 minute tick. And I think this is disappointing. So they haven't actually made the bezel correct. The green and black aren't equal. There's more black than green. The green should be higher up and splits higher up across the centre of the 6 hour on the bezel. So let's test the bezel execution. 120 click unidirectional bezel. So as a cross-cutting measure, they haven't used a bidirectional bezel, which they should have done on a GMT piece, and they've used the PD-1661 120 click unidirectional bezel. Now it feels rough, it doesn't feel smooth, and it doesn't feel consistent all the way through the 120 clicks of rotation, the 360 degrees. There are some sticking points throughout the 360 degrees of rotation where the bezel begins to seize up, so one has to give it some extra torsion in order to get it to rotate. And it feels rough. It feels rougher than a 1661 bezel, and it feels stiffer in terms of the ratcheting mechanism doesn't feel smooth. It feels gritty and it feels rough, so it's not pleasant to use. So let's check for lateral side-side play and back play. As you can see, we have back play. 1 click of back play, and we also have lateral side-to-side play. I'm just going to check it in various positions. Lateral side-side play throughout the 360 degrees of rotation, and I'm just going to check the back play in various positions. We have 1 click of back play all the way around the 360 degrees. So it's a poorly executed bezel. Now lastly, I'll just check the alignment. Right, so that's too far to the right. Next click, too far to the right. Next click, still too far to the right. If we go 1 more click, it's too far to the left. So I'm just going to check it again. The problem with it having 1 click of back play is it's actually difficult to align the triangle with the 12 o'clock index on the dial. Right, so that's now aligned. So the alignment is correct, but bear in mind it has 1 click of back play, so one can actually move the bezel, as you can see, by 1 click. So even when it's aligned, it can move out of position, either 1 click to the left or to the right, clockwise or anti-clockwise out of alignment. So it does align okay, but however it does have 1 click of back play all the way around the 360 degrees of rotation. So this is poor bezel execution. I've previously reviewed other versions of the 1662, for example the Pepsi, the Batman and the root beer. And the root beer did have a better bezel execution. It used the same 120 click unidirectional bezel as per the 1661. But the root beer had a tighter bezel action with less back play and also less lateral side-to-side play. So although it wasn't a bidirectional GMT bezel, the quality control, the build quality was better, and also it had perfect alignment. So Pagani Design are capable of making better 1662 bezels. The bezels on the Pepsi and the Batman I reviewed weren't as good. They were similar to this. They had some issues, but the root beer was a better version. So it's a disappointment that on this Riddler version they have got back play, lateral side-side play, and the alignment is okay, but of course we have the 1 click of back play, so there's room for improvement with that, and it is a disappointment. With regards to the crown, it's solid 316L grade stainless steel, coin edge finished, and embossed with the Pagani design mirror polish shield with a matte bead blasted background to it. Now, as this is a left-handed piece, it does take some getting used to because one unscrews the crown anti-clockwise, but one is used to having the crown on the 3 o'clock position and rotating the crown anti-clockwise by turning the crown towards oneself. So it does take some getting used to because it's reversed. One actually rotates the crown away from oneself rather than towards oneself, so anti-clockwise. Now, it's smooth, but it's not as smooth as an NH35A powered piece such as the 1661. There is a lot of friction and resistance. Now, that isn't down to the interface of the internal thread of the stainless steel crown with the external thread of the stainless steel crown tube. The resistance is caused by the movement used. Now, Pagani Design call the movement in this watch the Pearl DG5833 GMT. It's not actually a Pearl DG5833 GMT. The real name of the movement is the Mingzhu caliber DG3804. And the problem with it is, it's a characteristic of the DG3804 that it has a lot of friction in the winding stem. And one can feel it when one unscrews the crown. There's a lot of friction. It just doesn't feel smooth. So one has to really turn the crown to get the crown to rotate, not as light action as an NH35A. So pulling it out to the first click position is the date setting position, and that also operates the GMT hour hand. So by rotating the crown in the date setting position anti-clockwise, one can rotate the GMT hour hand, which is driven off the cannon pinion via the date complication. The Mingzhu caliber DG3804 is a clone of the ETA 2893 with a GMT hour hand added, and the GMT hour hand is driven off the cannon pinion, and so in the date setting position it drives both the date wheel and also the GMT hour hand. So rotating the crown anti-clockwise rotates the GMT hour hand clockwise, and if I reverse the date wheel, if I rotate the crown clockwise, you'll see that the quick set date complication clicks over. So the GMT hour hand is driven by the date wheel. Rotating the crown clockwise advances the quick set complication, and the quick set complication works well. It does feel similar to an NH35A. It clicks over with a nice positive click, and rotating it anti-clockwise will rotate the GMT hour hand clockwise. So the date complication and the GMT hour hand are synchronized. Pulling it out to the second click position on the crown is now the time setting position. Again, much more friction with the Mingzhu DG3804 than an NH35A. It's not as pleasant to set the time. The other thing to note about the DG3804 is there is backplay, and clockwise and anti-clockwise there is some slack. One can feel the backlash in the gearing, and so it's not immediate. For example, when one rotates the crown clockwise or anti-clockwise, there's a delay, there's some backplay between the minute hand moving both clockwise and anti-clockwise. It's not instant as per an NH35A. As you can see, if I'm rotating the crown clockwise and anti-clockwise now, and as you can see the minute hand isn't moving, I have to really give it a move. I've gone back into the date setting position. I'll just do it again. When I rotate the crown clockwise and anti-clockwise, you can see the minute hand isn't moving. There's some backplay. One has to really rotate it clockwise and anti-clockwise. So I dislike the backplay, which is a characteristic of the DG3804. They use the same movements in the PD-1662, which is an Explorer homage. And again, there is another problem with it. When one pushes the crown back in, sometimes it makes the GMT hour hand jump. So in order to remove that jumping characteristic, one has to slightly rotate the crown before pushing it back in. It's a really unpleasant movement to use. So pushing it back in restarts the movement. It does have hacking in it. As you can see, the second hand begins to sweep around the dial once again. So let's test screwing it back down. Now it doesn't have immediate thread pickup as per the NH35A. One has to really force the crown in. There's a lot of spring-loaded resistance to the winding stem. It's not pleasant. And I'm really having to push it in and turn it at the same time to get the threading to pick up. And again, this isn't caused by poor interface between the threading of the internal thread on the crown and the external thread of the stainless steel crown tube. It's simply caused by the spring-loaded resistance of the winding stem. The DG3804 is a very tight movement. There's a lot of friction. Because the build quality, the materials, the quality control and the finishing are all variable, and one can get a good or bad one. And if one gets a bad one with a loss of friction in the gearing, one can feel the resistance. One has to fight it constantly. So yes, it does feel smooth, but it's unpleasant. One has to really push it in hard. It feels similar to a PT-5000, for example, where one has to really push in the winding stem and turn it with a good firm turn. So it's not a pleasant crown to use, although it does work okay. Right, so I'll show you the Caseback. We have a screw-down exhibition Caseback, which provides an effective hermetic seal to 100 metres of water resistance. The exhibition Caseback is glazed with mineral crystal rather than sapphire crystal as a cost-cutting measure. However, that is acceptable at this price point. The screw-down crown is well executed. We've got concentric CNC lathe tool machining to the centre section, and the circumference is mirror polished to a good standard. The milled slots don't have any sharp edges or burrs, so credit where credit's due. Pagani Design do make very well executed screw-down exhibition Casebacks. It's also engraved to a high standard with the specification, and it does a good job of displaying the movement used, which, as I've discussed, Pagani Design describe it as the Pearl DG5833 GMT. In reality, it's a Mingzhu Caliber DG3804 automatic. So it does a good job of displaying it, and as you can see, the rotor is decorated with Pagani Design, and we also have a blued screw securing the rotor to the movement. So although it's plain and otherwise undecorated, it's nice to see the movement. The solid end links are a good tight fit to the case, and the underside to the head of the piece is well finished, no sharp edges to the underside of the flanks. Right, so I'll give you a wrist shot, and you can see how it fits on my 8-inch wrist. Now, I haven't sized the bracelet. I've simply taken the watch out of the watch box, and as you can see, it fits my 8-inch wrist with no difficulty whatsoever. And I can indeed fit an index finger underneath the bracelet and clasp at all times, so this will fit up to an 8.5-inch wrist. Now, with regards to the proportions of this piece are very good. 40mm head of the piece feels very good on my 8-inch wrist, so this will fit you regardless of whether you have a 6 to 7-inch wrist or a 7 to 8-inch wrist respectively. The taper of the oyster style bracelet is perfection. 20mm down to 16mm at the flip lock clasp is the perfect taper, and 20mm lug width is the correct lug width for a 40mm head of the piece. 48mm lug to lug measurement is perfection personified. It is the perfect sweet spot, the perfect lug to lug measurement, regardless of whether you have a 6 to 7-inch wrist or a 7 to 8-inch wrist. 40 by 48 is the ultimate case size, and it works very well with a 20 to 16 bracelet, as you can see. So they've got the proportions correct. The other thing I like about this piece is it's 13mm thick, and as you'll know from my previous reviews, I regard 13mm to be optimum because it will easily slip underneath a shirt cuff if you wear business shirts, and I think it's very low profile. Bearing in mind this is a GMT complication piece, 13mm is very good. 100 metres of water resistance is perfectly acceptable. There's no need to increase it to 200 metres because that would mean one needs a thicker sapphire crystal and a thicker exhibition Caseback. 100 metres is good enough for a GMT Master 2 homage, this Riddler homage. So, comfortable piece to wear, feel good factor is good, feels very well balanced, it doesn't feel top heavy. The oyster style bracelet perfectly balances the 40mm head of the piece. Right, so let's do a Lume test, and we'll see how the Lume performs when it's charged up to the absolute maximum. So as always, I'm going to use my 100 UV LED torch to charge it up to the absolute peak. Right, so that's now fully charged, and as you can see, this is very disappointing Luminova. As a cost-cutting measure, this clearly isn't BGW9 Super Luminova, it's blue Luminova. And there's actually a colour mismatch between the blue Luminova used on the Mercedes hands and the applied indices. On the hands, the Lume appears brighter, and on the applied indices on the dial, the Lume is slightly darker. And the reason for that is they've used the same colour Lume, but they've clearly applied more layers to the Mercedes hands, and therefore they're glowing slightly brighter than the indices. So as you can see, on both the hands and the indices, the Lume is quickly fading, and it will quickly fade to nothing. This is nothing like as good as BGW9 Super Luminova. As always, I'm critical of this, and like all collectors, I am sure that everyone would be happy to pay an extra €5 to €10 on the price of this watch in order to get BGW9 Superlume Nova, or alternatively C3 Superlume Nova. Weak lume is a characteristic of Pagani design watches, and it's a clear cost-cutting measure. And really, with regards to production costs, it's negligible because the cost of upgrading the lume to Pagani design would only be €5 with the batches they're making. They're making enormous batches of these watches. So really, they should consider upgrading to BGW9 or C3 Superlume Nova, because as you can see, it's now fading very quickly, and it's very disappointing. Right, so let's discuss the movement used. So Pagani design call it the Pearl DG5833 GMT. It's actually the Mingzhu caliber DG3804. And as I've detailed, the DG3804 is a clone of the ETA 2893, and they add a GMT hand which is driven off the Canon pinion. So the date complication and the GMT hour hand are synchronized. The date complication also drives the GMT hour hand, as I demonstrated. Now, the DG3804 is an unreliable movement. It's the luck of the draw whether one gets a good or bad one. If one gets a good one, they can run for years without any problem. However, if one gets a bad one, they can fail within a matter of months. And there's no way of telling whether one gets a good or bad one visually. The quality control, build quality, materials and the finishing vary widely. So one can get a very poorly finished or very well finished movement, and also a reliable or unreliable movement due to the QC being so variable. Now, the other thing that varies widely is the accuracy. The stated accuracy of the DG3804 is -20 to +40 seconds per day, so the same as an NH35A. This one is running consistently at +20, which is very poor accuracy. It's running very fast, and that's when it's fully wound to its maximum 40-hour power reserve. So +20 really is unacceptable, and that is a characteristic of the DG3804. The accuracy varies widely, and also when the power reserve is depleted, they run most accurate when they're fully wound to 40 hours, but when it's depleted, when they're at below 30%, you will find the accuracy varies widely. So it can run out by as much as ±20 seconds per day typically. So it's not an accurate movement, and it's not a reliable movement. It runs at 21,600 vibrations per hour and a frequency of 3 Hz, which is the same as the NH35A, and it has 22 joules. So unreliable movements, and I dislike it for that reason. Now, the other thing is, I would like to see Pagani design upgrade to using a higher grade of GMT movement, such as the Hangzhou 6460, or better than that, I would like to see them upgrade to using the new Seiko NH34A, which is used in the Seiko 5 GMT, and I think that the NH34A would be a much better movement because it's more reliable. Similar accuracy, builds quality, quality control and materials to the NH35A. So the 34A would be a better choice, or alternatively the Hangzhou 6460, both of which are better quality overall, more accurate and just more reliable. This really is a cost-cutting measure using the Mingzhu caliber DG3804, and of course Pagani design really are trying to disguise the fact it's a Mingzhu DG3804 because it has a poor reputation for reliability, and that's why they call it the Pearl DG5833 GMT. DG movements with a reference number beginning with DG, such as DG583, refer to Dixmont Guangzhou, and Dixmont Guangzhou actually make reliable movements. So of course, by labelling a movement as the Pearl DG5833, it makes it sound like a Dixmont Guangzhou movement, but in reality it's not. It's a Mingzhu movement, and Mingzhu DG3804s have a reputation for unreliability, so of course they want to try and hide that from collectors because it's not a selling point. Saying that the watch has a Mingzhu DG3804, calling it a Pearl DG5833 sounds better. So I dislike that, really. It's a marketing ploy. Right, so lastly I'll summarise the piece. What do I think of it overall? Well, when I'm considering reviewing a watch for my channel, the watch should meet 2 criteria. It should be both excellent quality and excellent value at the respective price point. So €120 is the price point of this piece. It's poor value and it's poor quality. There are several QC issues. The crooked Cyclops magnifier is a major negative. We also have the defects of the ceramic bezel insert. As I've detailed, the green portion is too low. It's not 50-50. As you can see, it's slightly low on the 6. It doesn't align correctly with the 3 o'clock index and the 15-minute tick on the chapter ring. So they've done a bad job of the ceramic bezel insert. They've also done a bad job of aligning the Cyclops magnifier. The Mingzhu DG3804 is an unreliable movement, so that's another cost-cutting measure. So let's examine the bracelet. As you can see, we have play in the end link, lateral side-side play, up and down play. So also we have play in the links in the other bracelet. So the bracelet rattles. This bracelet is not as good as a 1661 bracelet. I have seen better 1662 bracelets. For example, on the Root Beer, the Pepsi and the Batman versions of the 1662 I reviewed, they had tighter links. This 1662 Riddler version has a lot of rattle. There's a lot of play in all the links. Now, on a positive note, it doesn't have the problem of kinking links in the screw pin. Removable links, they articulate well, although there is the same problem with play in the screw pins as the other links. I'm just going to check the other side for continuity. And again, we have play, lateral side-side play, up and down play, and longitudinal play. So in every direction we've got play in the end links, and also, I mean, the play is significant. We're looking at 1 to 2. If you look here, we're looking at 1 to 2 millimeters of side to side play, 1 to 2 millimeters of up and down play. So it's in every direction, and the cumulative effect throughout the bracelet with all that play is it rattles. It's a sloppy bracelet. So this is a poor 1662 bracelet. It's not as good as the bracelets they're using on the 1692, Air King and Explorer Homage. They are tighter, they are better. So this is what really frustrates me about Pagani Design. They are capable of making better quality bracelets. I've reviewed 1661s with better, tighter bracelets with less play. And also the bracelet on my 1692 Air King Homage is tighter. It is better quality. So there's no reason why they can't do it on this 1662, and really it's a shame to see standards are slipping with regards to the build quality control of their bracelets. The clasp is good. The clasp doesn't have sharp edges or burrs. Now, with regards to the finishing to the head of the piece, the mirror polishing to the flanks is done to a good standard. Brush satin finishing to the tops of the lugs is good. The finishing to the scallops on the bezel is also good. So really, there are some QC issues. The quality to the finishing to the head of the piece and the case back is excellent, but unfortunately those positives are undermined by the negatives of the bracelet, which is abhorrent. So overall, it's poor quality, it's poor value. There are better options for €120, and for that reason I cannot recommend this PD-1662 Riddler to you for your consideration. So I hope you've enjoyed my review of the Pagani Design PD-1662 Riddler. Please feel free to post your own comments below the video. Thank you very much.